please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Indian macros are topic of all discussions. Investors, traders, equity guys, fixed income, and of course the common man. Today I have with me someone who can give us the official view on a whole host of macro issues that appear to worry the business community and investors. Sanjeev Sanyal, thank you very much for dropping by in our studio.
Pleasure.
Well, first up, we had those recent statements from the government saying that financial conditions are tightening and they are worried about the fisc. Let's take the first one first. Financial conditions, yes, year to date, bond yields have risen by 140 basis points. Is it already hurting growth, you think, or can hurt?
Well, obviously, if you have more expensive capital, it has some impact. Although, having said that, growth momentum has been extraordinarily good so far. As you know, we expect, at least the IMF expects this year's growth to be around 7.4%. But the first quarter of this calendar year, we had 7.7. So we are doing very well. And it's feeding through to all kinds of things. I mean, last year we introduced a slew of difficult measures, GST, cleaning up of the banks using IBC, demonetization, several others, RERA, etc., etc. And of course, they were difficult long-term reforms which did impact growth to some extent, but we are now on the other side of it, and we are beginning to now enjoy the benefit of it.
Okay.
Of course, more expensive capital does add some sand in the wheels, but there are feedback loops which slows down. So to that extent, we obviously also means our capital price of capital falls. So this is a difficult tightrope that every policymaker in the world has to manage. But as things stand, we are in a good place.
Okay. Well, the other thing that those statements said is that the fisc is challenging. Now, on the one hand, you have GST numbers which have definitely improved, 94,000 for the latest month compared to an average of 89,000 in the previous year. But on the other hand, farmers are, asking for more support. Do you think this once it may be inevitable that the fiscal targets will have to be breached? Simply because, MSP, so, the calculations we got from Niti Aayog were that it could be between 25,000 crores or something in terms of a support.
So obviously we are very serious about maintaining fiscal discipline. And, we have made many reforms, including in oil prices, where we have, been quite conservative at various levels. So it's not that we do not take this fiscal fiscal discipline issue seriously. We totally take it seriously, and yes, where there is space, we will spend, and we are making enormous investments, as you know, in the infrastructure space. Yes. However, there is an issue with agriculture that, by the way, there is a near-term issue of MSBs and so on, but there is also a much wider issue that we need to think about the agriculture sector as a whole in a long-term sense. So that conversation we really need to get going.
Yes, I will come to that. I mean, I can see your point that, globally the US has 3% of its population in farm, in agriculture, and we have, 50%. So I can see that problem. But before I come to that, I just want to know, do you think that because MSP farm is such a big issue, I mean, you're seeing this 10-day movement of farmers, therefore this once MSPs will, because this has an impact on inflation,
Prime Minister
has CPI.
The Prime Minister made certain commitments. We will obviously meet those commitments, but we will do it responsibly. Okay. And there is a large section of our population which does farming even today, something like 45% or thereabouts of our workforce still works in agriculture. It may be only 14% of GDP, but it still accounts for almost half our workforce. So it is a sector that we need to put special emphasis in at multiple levels. But as I said, we will try and we recognize we will have to make various trade-offs, and we will do it responsibly. Okay. But there is a larger question which I keep coming back about, rethinking agriculture as a whole. That has to be done at some point in time, and maybe the time is now.
Okay. Well, you can have your coffee, Sanjeev. I know you've rushed back from a conference. Okay, you will tackle fiscal targets responsibly. See, the Reserve Bank always worries that there is farm loan waivers from the states. The centre has been very responsible so far. You know, where did the NDA start? At 4.5, now at 3.5. But those were years when crude was kind to us. Now, crude itself is an input into inflation. If fiscal deficit also is more than 3.5, that's another input into inflation. So can the government give that kind of a succor to the RBI that, you know, they will not be the cause of inflation?
So, one of the big achievements of this government is maintaining fiscal discipline and macro stability.
Yes.
So we have put in a huge amount of effort into it. We introduced, of course, the Monetary Policy Committee. We anchored inflation in a very strict sort of way. And now we have now for several years enjoyed perhaps the most benign inflation India has ever, at least in my lifetime, has enjoyed. So it is not something we take lightly. So, of course, we will maintain control over inflation. Now, in this context, we have to also take into account the fact that in many cases, agriculture prices have this pressure downwards on one hand, and on the other hand, we have another problem which we have little control over. We are a price taker on oil, and we import a lot of our oil. So we have to, when oil prices go back, you know, we have to make the trade-offs where we can. So we created a mechanism which by and large passes through to some extent. Now, of course, we still have to watch this, where there is space for maneuvering. Should prices go even further up, we may have to make some adjustment, particularly at the state level. But nevertheless, in general, we maintain the line, and that we will continue to do because, as I said, anchoring inflation over the long term is a very, very important part of doing something else, which is the next step, which is structurally lowering the cost of capital in this country. So we have done the painful first step. We can't let it off, because then we will not benefit from the second thing, which is, you know, which once we lower the cost of capital in India structurally, then, you know, we are currently growing at 7+%. We can even do even 10+%. But that we will not be able to do with these current levels of cost of capital.
Reforms have to be thought through. But for the moment, just the other worry, which not just the central bank, I think the government will have even more, the current account deficit. It's not high, the last number we have, but then we are yet to see the full effects of crude. And hitherto, whenever there was global growth and higher oil prices, our exports fired. But this time, it's not really firing that much. The last number was good, but it, you know, the current account deficit. There are lots of brokerages talking about 65 billion current account.
So we do watch the current account very carefully, and there are two impacts which you both alluded to. One is, of course, oil, which goes through cycles, and it's spiked up recently. So there will be a feed through that. We have to take it on our chin. There is also another thing which is due to a good reason, which is we are now beginning to see capex take off. So this is a good thing, and we want capex to take off. But of course, it comes with a price, because while low capex is good for the current account deficit, when it begins to spike, remember, current account is the difference between savings and investment. Yes, investments will also grow as the economy grows, but the savings will also grow as the economy grows, but investments tend to be more spiky. So if all of a sudden you have a huge, sharp increase in investment activity, which anyway is happening on the public sector side, on infrastructure and so on, it now begins to happen from the private sector, building up capacities, which they hadn't been doing for a while. What happens? The current account gets hit by that as well. So these are issues on which we have to watch carefully. Of course, we are also seeing foreign inflows at multiple levels. So that is not currently an issue. We have a lot of foreign exchange reserves at record highs, 420+ billion for the foreign exchange. So we can soften these blows. But yes, we need to take cognizance of the fact that, yes, if you have high oil prices and the economy is accelerating and investments are going up, the current account will take some sort of a hit. And we have to then be able to make sure, one, pricing at reasonable prices keeps coming in, two, that foreign exchange reserves, where necessary, are used to smoothen whatever adjustment needs to be made.
Okay, but is there any, you know, Lakshman Rekha on the rupee, like you would worry if it is 70, or you worry if current account is at
No, in the end, of course, this is an issue on which the Reserve Bank is the competent authority. In general, the fact is, we do not like very large movements in any direction, and our foreign exchange reserves are used to smoothen that. In the end, however, we allow the market to move and do whatever it does in the longer term.
Let me come to the more important issue in which you have contributed a lot in terms of policy thinking, the insolvency code. Now we have seen two big benefits, one 35,200 crore coming from Bush and Steel, and now a few days back 5,300 crore coming from Vedanta on Electro-Steel. So while that process is on, the other problem is the Reserve Bank having to recognize what is already stressed, and there come the power assets. We have heard a lot of Power Ministry, Finance Ministry talking about this. Do you think a time has come for a stressed fund to be set up by the government? What is the government thinking on this?
So let's go back a year back. What was the problem? We had a huge amount of bad loans.
Policy thinking, the insolvency code. Now we have seen two big benefits, one 35,200 crore coming from Bush and Steel, and now a few days back 5,300 crore coming from Vedanta on Electro-Steel. So while that process is on, the other problem is the Reserve Bank having to recognize what is already stressed, and there come the power assets. We have heard a lot of Power Ministry, Finance Ministry talking about this. Do you think a time has come for a stressed fund to be set up by the government? What is the government thinking on this?
So let's go back a year back. What was the problem? We had a huge amount of bad loans, in fact, little more than a year back, maybe last February, March.
Yes.
We had a huge pile of bad loans. We didn't know what exactly was there in the books, and they were not getting recognized. So what we did was you opened the books up, and we began to get people to force to begin to recognize. In the process of that, of course, many scams also came out of the skeletons came falling out of the closet. So now what has happened, we have a fairly good idea of what is the landscape of these NPAs and where they reside, and to a large extent they have now been written off also.
Yes.
So that is step one done. It is also done two things. One, we avoided creating a bad bank, as you know, which would perhaps have become another warehouse like BIFR. Instead, we began to use a brand new mechanism called the IBC. Now, when we began using the IBC, did we know exactly where it would go? No, we didn't. We identified 50 odd top companies, we put it into it, and at every stage we have adjusted along the way in as practical a way as possible to keep this process going. And now you just mentioned we're coming to the end of that first lot is coming to the end of the cycle, and we are beginning to sell it, we're getting auction them or whatever, and we're getting money back. Even those who have not gone into the formal IBC process, as you know, 88,000 crores odd has come back, got resolved. So we are now in the process, we're on the other side of the cycle, and we are now getting the benefits from it.
Absolutely.
Now, there are, however, sectors where, whether because of judiciary or because of commercial reasons, we may have to make slightly different arrangements. That obviously in the case of, for example, real estate sector, where large numbers of home buyers may be stuck. One example. Yeah. Power sector, now we have the Honorable High Court has given us a certain judgment. We will now examine it and we will respond. We do not claim to know everything for all time. We are adjusting along the way. The point is that we have a broad framework now, which is the IBC.
Yes.
And that framework will be tweaked where necessary. We will create special arrangements where necessary. The point is to be practical and keep moving the thing forward. That is all. In the end, it's about being clear about the framework and about the fact that we will adjust along the way where necessary and quickly and keep moving forward.
Okay, no, actually this is, I guess, music to the ears of those who are plodding on with the legal work in IBC. One of the worries is that although the IBC has worked, the NCLTs have worked beautifully, it is the workload is 4,000 cases actually registered, but only 2,000 have been heard. So, or are various stages of hearing. One of the demands of, or the pleas of the legal community is, can we have more NCLTs? Are you seeing that as?
So sure, I mean, capacity is an issue, and you know, we need to build that. And by the way, we can't just simply load it on. We need the right quality of judges, people who understand these things. We need more people in the insolvency professional, and again, we need to be careful who is let in and let out, otherwise you'll have all kinds of unscrupulous people also coming in. So it is somewhere we have to run it at a certain pace. Nevertheless, we recognize that, you know, everything cannot be solved through this process, so other processes have to be created. And by the way, you know, the Reserve Bank's February 12 notification also will add to this process.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, once the process has more or less been created, I mean, through this recent experience, we have now created precedents, processes, and so on. More processes will have to be created, new rules will have to be tweaked. But as we do it, we understand that this is an area where attention needs to be paid, and resolution is happening at multiple levels, and not everything has to come to NCLT. And you know, we've demonstrated it through this route, but in fact, to a large extent, particularly smaller cases, we may need to allow for different kinds of resolution. MSMEs can, you know, you cannot carry out the same kind of level of scrutiny and auctioning, etc., for say a small company that produces pipes with 20 people in somebody's backyard. Cannot have the same level and processes, etc., and than say Bhushan Steel. So again, some adjustment may have to be made, and in fact, as you may be aware, there is an ordinance in the pipeline looking into some of these issues.
Okay. No, one has come saying that MSMEs are not included, or rather very small companies don't have to go. Will there be more tweaks? Because some was expected, related party and all.
As a general principle, this government functions without the approach that the high priests of Planning Commission know the solution to every problem.
Okay.
So I keep making to you, we have created broad frameworks and we will adjust along the way. This is exactly how we introduced, by the way, the GST.
Yes.
We spent 20+ years discussing what should be done, but in the end, when it was done, nobody was sure what would happen.
Absolutely.
So the only way you can do it is to introduce it and be open-minded, using framework feedback to adjust.
Okay.
And yes, it requires you to be humble enough to know that, you know, adjustments need to be made.
Absolutely.
But in the end, this effort has been made. A year on, the GST by and large works. It may not be perfect. We do not claim that it is the most perfect thing ever. Can we improve on it? Absolutely. But we have a unified tax system for the whole country. It's done. What we debated for decades, when I was at university, it was being decades. We did it. Same thing, IBC. Do we know exactly how it will work? No. We did it. Now we are seeing some of these things getting liquidated, large amounts of money coming back. Is it the most perfect possible system? No. We need to invest into creating capacity. We need to still create, you know, bells and whistles around the rules, but we will keep adjusting it till it becomes, and maybe it'll never be a perfect system, but that is fine.
Okay. Well, just two more questions on this IBC. Are you, I mean, what are your thoughts on power itself? Do you need to lengthen the time that they are given, or you know, will the NIIF bring some money? There was some Samadhan scheme which is
every single option will be
NIIF money is possible, because
that's
that
also
would be a
possible.
big help.
We are open-minded about what the solution. Problem is to solve the problem, not to have some pre-existing ideological view about this is the only way it should be done. It's a practical problem. We'll solve it practically, but it has to be solved. Energy is a major issue, and multiple levels. I mean, you have the coal-fired and gas-fired guys, and you also have the solar and other renewable guys. So they need different solutions in different places. The point is to solve the problem and keep moving forward. Getting caught in some detail, bureaucratic wrangle is what is the biggest danger, rather than, you know, having
various
solutions. Some of them may even not turn out right. But point is to be open-minded and keep moving forward.
Okay, well, yes, that certainly sounds the best way to go about. Just a final question. You know, the February 12th circular has created its own, you know, opposition, and a lot of people in the banking system also believe that this was the only way to go. A lot of investor brokerages gave it a thumbs up. Do you think some tweaks are needed? What's the government standpoint?
Well, we have had discussions on the Reserve Bank. Of course, there are pros and cons on that. And as I said, you know, there are different views that have been feedbacks on this. And the Reserve Bank governor and deputy governors are all aware of we now have a new deputy governor, as you know. He's a banker himself. Yeah. So, and will know all these issues. So, at an appropriate time, if adjustments are needed, adjustments will be made. At every stage, the point I'm making to you is we take feedback, some judgment is taken on trade-offs, that's what policy making is about, but reasonably quickly some solution is found. Absolutely. And if it is decided that, look, given all the various options, continuing with this is the best option, that too may happen.
Great to hear that it is absolutely undogmatic an approach that the government will take. Just one final question on which dogma usually applies. It's usually that the central bank, especially an inflation targeting MPC, is dogmatic about reaching its goal and using interest rate, the only tool it has to reach that inflation goal. And usually governments oppose it because it comes in the way of growth. Will that opposition come from the government?
Look, every central bank and every finance ministry in the world debate these ad nauseum. It's a good tension to be there in the system. Nothing to be too worried about. In fact, you found central bank governors who were in the finance ministry shift over and
yes.
take the opposite view. That happens all the time. It's a good thing.
All right. Good to hear that tension also will be used constructively. Sanjeev Sanyal, a pleasure having you with us. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.